Tonight with a story that is making headlines all around the world. Pope Francis ordering the removal of Bishop Joseph Strickland, the leader of the Catholic Diocese of Tyler. Strickland, an outspoken conservative, has been a frequent critic of Pope Francis and his priorities. Most recently, Strickland criticized Pope Francis's closed-door debate on making the Catholic Church more welcoming. Topics included women in governance roles and welcoming LGBT Catholics. Strickland called it a, quote, travesty that those topics were even on the table for discussion. Today we spoke with Father Tim Kelly of Holy Spirit Church in Holly Lake Ranch, who has previously called for Strickland's resignation.
The issue here is not about Tim Kelly or Joe Strickland. The issue here is about we're Roman Catholics. A Catholic never, ever speaks ill of the Pope in public. You can say what you want over a cup of coffee, but a priest or a lay person. The Pope is not Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whatever. The Pope is a sacred person chosen by the cardinals to succeed to the throne of St. Peter.
Now, earlier this year, the Vatican launched an investigation into Strickland's governance of the diocese amid reports he was making unorthodox claims. The findings of that investigation have not been released. Strickland reportedly said he would not resign voluntarily. We reached out to Bishop Strickland today for comment, and he told us he could not speak with us today.